They said Robb Stark died at the Red Wedding. They weren't wrong. His body was cold. His eyes were open, staring into nothing. His blood had soaked the stones of the twins. His mother had screamed, her throat cut just seconds after his heart stopped beating. The young wolf was gone. The North had lost its king, but death in Westeros is not always the end. When the Freys dumped his body into the river, it was meant as an insult. Let the fish eat the king in the North. But the waters did not carry him far. The currents slowed. The night grew strange. The sky cracked with red lightning no one saw. Except a man watching from the trees, a red priest exiled from Volantis. Thoros had once spoken of strange fires. This one believed them. He pulled the body from the river himself, dragged it with trembling hands to an old fire pit deep in the woods. The man had no name left, only a purpose. He had seen a vision, a wolf burning in the snow, a crown of embers on its brow. He built the fire high, then placed the stiff, soaked body of Robb Stark in the center. He whispered prayers in a language older than Westeros. Blood dripped from his palms as he carved runes into the dirt. The fire did not take at first. But when he spoke the last words, Azor Ahai, come again by salt and by smoke, wake the flame. The flames exploded upward in a column of gold and red. The man didn't live to see what happened next. Robb Stark awoke in fire, gasping like a man dragged from a lake, choking, clawing at the air. But he wasn't burning. The flames curled around him, dancing on his skin, but leaving no scars. His wounds were gone, his chest unpierced. No wolf's head sewed on his shoulders. He was whole, naked, confused and cold now that the fire had gone out. He crawled into the dirt. Around him was nothing but ash and a burned-out forest clearing. The man who had saved him or cursed him was a skeleton in robes, and in his chest something new. A weight, a heat. It pulsed like a second heart. When Robb looked into the river for his reflection, he didn't recognize the man staring back. His eyes weren't just grey anymore. They shimmered faintly red, like embers hiding under snow. He wandered for days, hiding from soldiers, avoiding men. Every night he dreamed. Visions of a sword forged 3 times in fire, of a woman he loved, crying as he stabbed her in the heart, of the wall cracking like glass. A voice whispered to him again and again, "You are the prince that was promised." But Robb didn't believe in prophecy. He believed in honor, in war, in vengeance. That changed the day he found Grey Wind. They had said his direwolf was dead too, killed, butchered. But the beast limped to him from the woods, scarred and savage, eyes wild. And yet, the moment it saw him, it knelt. Something no direwolf had ever done. Robb dropped to his knees, burying his face in its fur. That was the first time he wept since his death. That was the moment he stopped running from what he'd become. He wasn't just Robb Stark anymore. He was something else, something dangerous, and the North would remember. But first, they would fear. Robb moved through the riverlands like a ghost. He wore a hood now, drawn low over his face. The scars of death still clung to him, his skin too pale, his eyes too sharp. He barely spoke, and when he did, the words came out slow, colder than winter. Grey Wind walked beside him, larger than before, like the fire had changed the direwolf. Too, the animal's fur was streaked with soot, his eyes brighter, yellow and red mixed like twin torches in the dark. He kept to the woods, moving only at night, but word spread like wildfire, even when he didn't want it to. Whispers of a burning man, seen near the ruins of villages sacked by Freys, a silent Northman with a wolf that killed without sound. Bodies found charred but untouched by flame. Farmers swore they saw Catelyn Stark weeping beside a man who looked like her son, but was wrong in the eyes. The faithful called it blasphemy. The broken called it a miracle. Robb said nothing, But he listened. He visited the remains of River Run first. The Tully stronghold stood quiet, occupied by Lannister men and traitors. He didn't strike then. He waited, studied, watched the men who wore red lions on their chests drink, piss, and forget. That night, he burned their banners down to the last thread. He left no name, only a sigil drawn in ash, a direwolf on fire. By the time he reached the neck, the whispers had grown louder. The Freys had begun to panic. Rose Bolton, now warden, of the North in name, had doubled the guard at Winterfell. Even the Iron Throne had sent ravens, because something was wrong. Someone was rising. He crossed into the North in silence. The land welcomed him. It had changed, and so had he. The cold didn't touch him anymore. The snow melted under his feet. He walked barefoot, sometimes bare-chested, even in blizzards. Grey wind howled at the moon and never went hungry. Robb hadn't eaten in days, yet felt stronger than ever. But it wasn't power he wanted. It was justice. It was vengeance. One night, a group of wildlings attacked a small village near the Dreadfort. Men, women, even children were slaughtered. Robb arrived hours too late. Smoke still rose from the charred houses. The corpses hadn't even cooled. He stood there, staring at the bodies. Then he heard something. Soft, shaky breathing. A girl, no older than 12, trapped beneath her dead mother. He dug her out with his bare hands. She looked up at him, face streaked with ash, eyes wide with terror. She didn't scream. She just whispered, "You're him, aren't you? The burning wolf?" He didn't answer, but she followed him anyway. That was how it began. One by one, others joined. Broken men, bastards, orphans, old soldiers who had once ridden for the Starks. They didn't ask who he was. They simply saw him, saw grey wind, saw the fire in his eyes, and they followed. He never gave speeches, never called himself king, never called himself anything at all, but they started to call him the fireborn. When they moved through abandoned towns, crops began to grow where his feet passed. When wounded men lay dying, his hands, hot and shaking, pressed on their skin and burned the infection away. He didn't know how it worked, only that it hurt him more each time. But he kept doing it because something was coming, and it wasn't just Bolton or the Freys. It wasn't even the Lannisters. It was something older, deeper. Beyond the wall, he felt it. Cold winds that carried whispers. Shadows in the snow. The visions came stronger now. A pale king with eyes of ice, a sword glowing like the sun, a wall of flesh and death. The long night was coming back, and Azor Ahai had already risen. When he finally stood before the gates of Winterfell again, it was almost silent. Snow fell heavy, thick like a funeral shroud over the ancient stone walls. Fires flickered on the ramparts, but the guards standing watch weren't paying attention. They hadn't seen the man in the dark cloak, the direwolf pacing beside him, or the crowd of quiet, ragged people behind him. Refugees, soldiers, believers, a strange army of fire and silence. Robb looked up at the towers, breathing in the cold air of his home. It should have hurt coming back, but he felt nothing, just a tightness in his chest. He wasn't here for nostalgia. He was here for him, Rose Bolton. He was in there, parading around as Warden of the North, sitting in Robb's father's chair, feeding his bastard fat on stolen meat. The very man who'd stuck a knife through Robb's heart at the Red Wedding, now wearing his stolen crown in the stolen home of House Stark. Robb clenched his fists. Grey wind snarled. He stepped forward. The first arrow never even left the guard's bow. The man dropped to the floor, screaming, his hands burnt to the bone. Robb didn't raise a hand, didn't say a word, just stared until the flames burst. From the arrow, slits like lanterns being snuffed out from within. His followers didn't need command. They rushed forward like water bursting a dam, breaking through the gates with torches, steel and fury. Winterfell's outer guards weren't prepared. They never expected an army in rags. They never expected him. Inside the great hall, Rose. Bolton was dining on meat and wine, with lords too cowardly to fight and too clever to resist. When the first screams echoed down the corridor, he stood calmly, wiping his fingers on a silk cloth. "Fetch the boy," he said to a servant. He should see how power is kept. But by the time they dragged Ramsay Snow into the hall, kicking and red-faced, the torches on the walls were flickering with unnatural heat. Ramsay stopped laughing when he heard the howls. That howl, it wasn't a regular wolf. Rose narrowed, his eyes. "That's impossible." Then the doors exploded. Robb walked through the fire without burning, grey wind right behind him, and the sight made even hardened killers pale. His face was pale, but his eyes, they glowed like a hearth in the dead of night. Rose reached for his blade. Robb didn't let him touch it. He raised his hand, and the flames on the torches surged upward like they'd caught wind. The room went bright, then dark. When the light settled again, Roose Bolton was on his knees, his clothes smoking, his eyes full of disbelief. "You were dead," Rose muttered. "I was," Robb said. Then he drove a sword, not Lightbringer, not yet, through Rose Bolton's chest, slow, deliberate. Rose didn't scream. He just stopped breathing. Ramsay screamed enough for both of them. They dragged him outside, tied to a post. Some wanted to burn him, some wanted the dogs. Robb said nothing, but when he looked at Ramsay, the bastard pissed himself. He knew death when he saw it. Robb turned away. Let the North deal with him. That night, they lit a fire in the center of the courtyard. It burned hotter than any Winterfell had ever known. His people, his real people, stood in a circle around him. They chanted no name. They didn't have to. The fire danced for him, curved toward him like it recognized its maker, and from the shadows stepped a woman. She wore red. Her hair was copper, her eyes old, older than they should have been. "I felt your fire across the world," she whispered. "I have followed the signs." Robb looked at her. His expression was stone. "Who are you?" "I am Melisandre," she said. "I served a false king once. I won't make that mistake again." Robb turned back to the flames. "I don't want a throne." "You don't have a choice," she said. "The great other rises, the Night King stirs. You are Azor Ahai, and you must be ready." Robb didn't speak, but he knew she was right, because in his dreams now, the wall was crumbling, and death was coming. The wall had always seemed like it would stand forever, a fortress of ice and magic, stretching across the world, holding back whatever horrors lived beyond. But nothing lasts forever. Not kingdoms, not kings, and certainly not walls. Robb felt it before it happened. 3 nights after retaking Winterfell, he woke. In a cold sweat, breath shallow, body burning like he was still in the fire. Grey wind whined beside him, pacing, teeth bared at something invisible. In his dream, he'd stood atop the wall, but it wasn't made of ice anymore. It was glass, cracking beneath his feet. On the other side, a sea of blue eyes. Then he saw it, a figure on a pale horse crowned in frost, pointing a blade of pure night straight at him. He woke up gasping, and he knew the wall had fallen. By morning, ravens confirmed it. The reports were scattered, panicked. But the message was the same. The dead have come. Castle Black was gone, Eastwatch swallowed by snow and silence. Some said a dragon with shattered wings had torn through the wall with fire, so cold it burned. Others claimed the Night King walked through it like it wasn't even there. Either way, the North was no longer safe. Winterfell became a camp of movement and madness. Melisandre took charge of the fire rituals, claiming the only way to stop the dead was with Lightbringer, the legendary sword of the promised hero. Robb ignored her at first. He had steel, armies, and fire in his blood. That was enough. But when his scouts returned from the last hearth, trembling and near mad, he began to listen. There were no bodies, one said. Just cold. Cold. Like the world stopped. No blood, said another. No screams. They don't kill like men do. They take. They turn. Robb stood alone in the godswood that night. Snow fell gently, the heart tree watching him like it remembered his family. He closed his eyes, searching for answers. Visions came again. This time he saw a forge. A sword plunged into a woman's chest. Her face changed. One moment, Talisa. The next, Catelyn. Then Arya. He staggered back. Melisandre was waiting behind the tree. "You've seen it now," she said softly. "I won't do it," Robb hissed. "The sword must be tempered in a soul," she said. "A willing one, or the world dies." He wanted to scream, to burn the tree, the woman, everything. But deep down he knew she was right. The fire in his blood wasn't enough. The darkness needed more than steel and rage. It needed sacrifice. And that was when she arrived. Arya. She stepped through the gates of Winterfell like a ghost of vengeance. Dressed in leathers, face half hidden beneath her hood, she moved like wind over snow. She barely looked at Robb when they embraced, just whispered, "You're supposed to be dead." "I was," Robb said, "but I'm here now." She didn't ask questions, just joined the war council like she belonged there. Jon Snow hadn't been seen in months. Bran had vanished beyond the wall. Sansa was in the Vale, gathering support, but Arya had returned, and Robb hated that. Because now he feared the dream. He feared what Lightbringer might demand. As days passed, more survivors came south, eyes wide and haunted. Whole towns had vanished. The dead moved fast, not like men, not even like wolves. They didn't eat, they didn't sleep, they just marched. One night, while standing by the fire, Arya spoke up quietly. "You've changed," she said. "I died," Robb replied. "You came back colder." "I had to." She nodded slowly. "You're not the brother I knew, but you might be the man the world needs." He looked at her. Really looked. Her face was cut, weathered, eyes older than they should have been, and in her belt a dagger of Valyrian steel, the same one used against Bran all those years ago. The same one she would one day use to kill the Night King, unless prophecy demanded something else. Melisandre watched them both like a spider watching a flame. She already knew what Robb feared. She had seen it in her flames. Her voice broke the silence. "You know what must be done." Robb turned away. "Not yet. The White Walkers were 4 days away. 4 days left to choose who dies." Winterfell burned with light like it hadn't in centuries. Not with joy, not with warmth, but with the fury of a world standing on the edge of its grave. The dead had come. They reached the edge of the forest first, quiet, slow, almost peaceful. Then the winds shifted, the trees cracked under frost, and the first wave broke through like a flood of silence and death. Thousands of bodies, dead for weeks or centuries, moved without sound, without hunger, without mercy. Robb stood on the wall, his sword drawn. His breath steamed in the air even though he no longer felt the cold. Grey Wind paced behind him, snarling but silent. Below, the last free armies of the north waited. Wildlings, broken houses, common folk with pitchforks, unsullied remnants, even deserters from the Vale. All of them stood behind the fireborn king, and for once, Robb felt none of it was enough. Melisandre stood beside him, her red robe soaked in melted snow. She looked calm, too calm. "You must do it now," she said. He didn't answer. Not yet. Arya was in the courtyard, her dagger already dripping with dragonglass poison. She had killed more than anyone knew. Faceless, fast, and deadly, Robb had watched her take down whites like it was breathing. But this next battle wasn't about bodies. It was about breaking the dark heart of it all. "The Night King is near," Melisandre whispered. "If you do not forge the sword, you will not survive him." Robb's hands trembled, not from fear, but from something else. His body burned hot inside, fire racing through his veins, begging to be unleashed. "I'm not killing her," he said. Melisandre looked at him with pity. "Then everyone dies." Suddenly, horns sounded. 3 blasts. They were at the gates. The first clash was brutal. Men screamed, steel cracked, horses cried as the dead swarmed over the walls like ants. Dragonglass worked, yes. Valyrian steel killed, yes. But there were too many. Every time one fell, 2 rose behind it. Robb fought like a demon. Fire leapt from his blade with every strike. His hands glowed with heat when he touched a wight's throat. His very presence slowed the cold. Wherever he went, death hesitated, but only for seconds. He found Arya near the crypts, alone, covered in ash and blood, breath heavy. "Go back inside," he said. She spat blood and shook her head. "Not until they're all dead." "They don't stop, Arya," he said, voice cracking. "Not unless I end him." She narrowed her eyes. "So do it. I need more." That's when she looked at him, really looked, the way he looked. At her the night she returned. She saw it, not the fear, the knowledge. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she whispered. He nodded, his throat tight. "The sword," she said. "I saw myself forging it." Her voice cracked. "With me. I'll find another way." "There is no other way," came Melisandre's voice behind them. "You were reborn in fire, but fire alone cannot end this war. Only the true Lightbringer can." Arya didn't run. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She stepped forward. "If it's me or the world," she said, "then do it before I change my mind." Robb's knees almost buckled. "No," he whispered. "Please." "You think I haven't made choices like this?" she said. "I lost myself years ago. I'm already a weapon. Just make me the last one you'll ever need." Robb looked at her, and all the years came back in a flash. Needle, Nymeria, her laughter, her darkness, her pain. He kissed her forehead. Then he raised the sword. The scream she made wasn't one of fear. It was defiance. A sound that pierced through the clouds and made even the dead pause. When the blade pierced her chest, fire erupted from her like a second sun exploding over Winterfell. Robb fell to his knees, clutching the sword, now glowing red-hot, burning his skin but not dropping it. Lightbringer had been born. The dead stopped. The Night King turned his head for the first time, slowly, toward Robb Stark, and began to walk. The night split open. Where there had been only snow and shadows, now there was fire. Not wildfire, not dragon flame, something older, deeper, something sacred. A burning light that came not from the sky, but from one man. Robb Stark rose from the ground with Lightbringer in his hands. The sword pulsed like a beating heart. Red and gold flames wrapped around its steel, flowing down the hilt into his arms, searing his skin. But he didn't flinch. The pain was part of it. His hands bled, smoke curled from his fingertips, but he held the sword like it had always belonged to him. Arya's body lay behind him, still and glowing faintly with the last warmth of her sacrifice. He didn't dare look at her again. He couldn't. If he did, he might break, and there was no time left for breaking. A cold wind pushed through the battlefield. Soldiers stumbled, blades clattered to the ground. Even grey wind growled low, tail tucked. The dead turned in unison, as if they felt it too. He was coming. And then, from the fog of death and snow, the Night King appeared. He did not ride a horse this time. He didn't need to. He walked with the stillness of a storm, already decided. Every step he took froze the mud and blood beneath him. His sword was drawn, black as obsidian, humming with quiet doom. Robb stepped forward, fire swirling around his feet, melting the snow in wide circles. The battlefield cleared itself, like the land knew this moment didn't belong to armies. It belonged to legends. The Night King stopped only 10 paces away. His face was the same as Robb had seen in every dream, frozen, unmoving, ancient. His eyes burned blue, empty, endless, neither spoke. Then they moved. Their blades collided like thunder, the impact shaking the ground. Lightbringer screamed as it struck the Night King's blade, fire crashing against ice, the shockwave sent. Men flying, cracked stones, burst windows inside Winterfell's walls. The fight wasn't clean, it wasn't elegant, it was savage. Robb struck again and again, and the flames followed his movements, lighting the dark like a god had descended from the heavens. But the Night King did not fall back. He fought like ice incarnate, silent, cold, inevitable. Each blow from the Night King chipped away at Robb's strength. The cold tried to crawl back into his bones, even as the fire inside him burned hotter. His muscles screamed, his vision blurred, his soul ached. He was man and myth now, but still flesh. He began to falter, and the Night King saw it. He drove Robb to his knees with a final strike, blade pressed to Lightbringer's hilt. The fire dimmed for a heartbeat. And then Robb heard her voice. "You're not done, you stupid wolf." Arya, not her voice in the wind, her dagger lying in the snow, glowing faintly with her warmth, just feet from him. Valyrian steel. Robb let go of Lightbringer with one hand, grabbed the dagger and thrust it upward, straight into the Night King's side. There was no scream. Just light. Blinding, golden, searing light that exploded from within the Night King's chest. His body froze mid-step. The blue in his eyes flared bright, then cracked like glass. His mouth opened, not in pain but confusion. Then he shattered, and the dead fell, all of them. Across the field, within the forests, even beyond the wall, whites dropped where they stood, bones crumbling into dust. The storm above faded. The snow stopped. The silence returned. Winter had lost. Robb collapsed beside Arya's body, Lightbringer clattering beside him. The fire in him was dim now, quiet. He had done what was needed. The prophecy was real, but the price had been too high. He wept, openly, loudly, not as a king, not as a god, but as a brother. A boy who had lost everything to save everyone. Melisandre stood in the distance, watching the last embers of the long night fade, her eyes closed, her purpose fulfilled. Behind her, dawn began to rise. The world didn't cheer. There were no songs, no trumpets, no banners waving in the breeze. When the long night ended, the survivors didn't erupt in joy. They fell to the ground. Some wept. Some stared into the nothingness where death had once stood. Some simply slept, right there in the snow, too broken to celebrate. Robb Stark rose from the ashes, but he wasn't the same man who had walked into that battle. His hair had gone white at the temples. His face was gaunt, carved by fire and grief. The red light in his eyes flickered now, less like a flame, more like dying embers. He moved slowly, as if the weight of the world still clung to his shoulders, pressing down harder with every breath. Grey wind stayed by Arya's body, unmoving, head low, whining softly into her torn cloak. Robb didn't touch her. He couldn't. He just stood there, staring at the girl who had once been his wild little sister, the one who used to chase cats and mock knights, the girl who had once offered to kill a Frey for him with a wooden sword. Now she was gone, and the fire in his heart would never be the same. He buried her in the godswood, beneath the old heart tree. No stone, no words, just snow and silence. By the next morning, people had begun to whisper again. Some called him Azor Ahai, savior of the realm. Others called him the Wolf of Flame, the fireborn king, breaker of the long night. Melisandre said nothing. She simply lit a pyre on the hill outside Winterfell, walked into the flames, and vanished like smoke. Her work was done, but Robb's wasn't. The north was broken, the Riverlands were lawless, the Iron Throne sat empty, reduced to melted slag after Daenerys's final march. Dragons were gone. So were queens, lords, and legends. All that remained was ash, rubble, and a people too tired to dream. And Robb Stark, walking through it like a man who didn't belong to the world anymore. He left Winterfell at dusk with grey wind, sword strapped to his back, wrapped in furs he no longer needed. The fire inside him kept him warm, but it didn't keep him human. Sansa returned 2 days later to find the castle half empty. She asked where her brother had gone, but no one knew, or if they did, they wouldn't say. She found the grave in the godswood, the blood-stained cloak, the imprint of a sword in the snow. She understood. In the weeks that followed, Robb wandered the north alone. He passed through towns like a ghost, never sleeping, never eating, eyes burning beneath his hood. Children whispered about the man with the flaming wolf. Old women swore. He brought crops back with a touch. Wolves followed him in the woods. Fires lit themselves in abandoned hearths where he stepped. He didn't speak, he just moved. And in his dreams, Arya still spoke to him. Not words of comfort, just one, over and over again. Live. But Robb didn't know how. He had saved the world, and now he had to live in it. But what did a sword forged in sacrifice do when there was no war left to fight? He returned once, to the ruins of the wall. It was shattered, half melted, half broken by cold magic. The north, beyond, it was empty, dead. But in the distance, where the wind howled through broken trees, Robb felt something still lingered. Not the White Walkers, no, but echoes, shadows of the dark. He stayed there for a night, alone, watching the stars. That night, the fire in. Lightbringer dimmed for the first time, not out, just resting. He understood then. The war had ended, but his story hadn't. He wasn't a king anymore, not a Stark, not even Azor Ahai. He was something else, something the world would never quite understand. Years passed. The world moved on, as it always does. Spring returned to the north. The trees bloomed again, timidly, like they weren't quite sure the dark was truly gone. Crops grew. Rivers unfroze. Birds sang again where once only crows cried. And the people, they healed, slowly, unevenly. The scars of the long night ran deep, not just in the land, but in the hearts of everyone left behind. Sansa ruled from Winterfell, queen in the north. She wore her red hair like a crown, her words like steel. She rebuilt what war and death had tried to bury. The bannermen bent the knee without question. Even the stubborn houses, the Karstarks, the Umbers, the Mormonts, stood by her. She gave them peace, stability, but not Robb. He never returned, not even once. Some said he died not long after the war, somewhere beyond the wall, walking into the snow with only grey wind and Lightbringer. Others said he became something more, something no longer bound by death, life, or blood, a spirit of vengeance, a god of fire and justice who walked among the shadows of the north, protecting it from whatever dark things still crawled in forgotten corners. Some even claimed to see him. A child lost in the woods, found near a burned ring of trees with warm, bread at her feet. A frail deserter, throat slit clean but cauterized instantly, body found with a direwolf print in the snow beside him. A wildfire that erupted overnight in a haunted village where the dead had been buried wrong, always followed by silence. And a single mark burned into the ground, a flaming direwolf. Legends grew, songs were written, though none of them could capture the truth. Not really, how could they? They sang of the boy king who rose from death to end the long night, of the sister he had to sacrifice, of the sword that shone like the sun, of the night king shattering like glass beneath a dagger and a brother's love. But none of them knew the face he made when he did it. None of them knew how quiet he became after, or how heavy the sword felt in his hands once the world no longer needed him to carry it. And so Robb Stark faded from history, not erased, just forgotten by those too young to remember what it felt like when the world almost ended. But the North remembered, and in the farthest wilds, where no map dares to name the valleys or the frozen hills, Travelers sometimes speak of a fire seen deep in the woods, a quiet man beside it, pale, tired, alone, with a wolf by his side. They say he never speaks. He just listens, and if you're lucky or damned, you might look into his eyes and see not a man, but a flame, the last ember of a world that was saved, by a king who died, by a brother who burned, by a wolf who came back to finish what death could not.